You've probably already met someone secretly worth millions and had absolutely no idea. And the scary part, you probably judged them wrong. Here's what nobody really tells you about wealth. Real wealth. Not the Instagram kind, not the Lisa Lambo kind. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. And that's actually the first sign, if you know what you're looking for. Because the way most people picture wealthy is, honestly, just a performance. It's the result of decades of advertising telling you that money looks a certain way. Loud, shiny, visible. And a lot of people bought into that. Sometimes literally. Financing things they can't afford just to signal something to strangers who don't care. But the quietly wealthy, they figured something out early, or maybe they were taught it. Either way, they stopped playing that game a long time ago. And once you know what to actually look for, the real signals, the behavioral ones, the ones that don't show up on someone's Instagram, you start seeing it everywhere. The neighbor who drives the same 10-year-old sedan but just bought their third rental property in cash. The coworker who never talks about money but somehow never seems stressed about it either. The quiet one at the dinner table while everyone else is arguing about the bill. These people exist. They're around you. And there are specific, consistent patterns in how they think, how they move, how they talk, and how they don't talk. That's what this is about. Not theory, not motivation. Just 13 things that quietly give it away if you're paying attention. There's a reason most people can't spot real wealth. And it's not because they're not smart enough. It's because they were never taught what to look for. Think about how you learned what rich looks like. It wasn't from wealthy people. It was from movies, commercials, music videos, reality TV. All of it carefully designed to make wealth feel like a visual thing. A thing you wear, a thing you park in the driveway, a thing you post. And that image got deep into people's heads, really deep. So when someone shows up without the visual cues, no designer label, no flashy car, no obvious display, the brain just files them under normal. Maybe even struggling, because they don't match the template. Here's the uncomfortable part though. That template, it was mostly built by people trying to sell you something. The luxury brand needs you to believe that the bag signals status. The car company needs you to believe that the vehicle signals success. They're not wrong that people believe it. They just never mention that the people buying those things to signal wealth often aren't that wealthy. And the people who actually are, a lot of them quietly stopped caring what you think about their car a long time ago. That's a psychological shift that's hard to explain until you've seen it up close. It's not arrogance. It's not minimalism as a trend. It's something quieter than that. It's what happens when your sense of self stops being tied to external validation. When you don't need the room to know, when you know, and that's enough. Most people never get there, not because they can't afford to, but because they were never shown that it was even an option, and so they keep performing, keep upgrading, keep financing the appearance of a life they think looks successful. Meanwhile, the quietly wealthy person sitting next to them at the DMV, same plastic chair, old sneakers, reading something on a cracked phone screen, has already made more money this month in passive income than most people make in 6. You'd never know. That's the whole point. So before we get into the actual signs, I want you to hold on to that. The biggest reason people miss this isn't lack of information. It's that they're running the wrong detection system entirely. They're looking for flash when they should be looking for behavior. They're looking at surface when the real signals are all underneath. Once you recalibrate that, these 13 signs start jumping out at you in everyday life, and some of them are going to feel almost uncomfortably familiar. The first sign is almost too simple. They don't talk about money, not in the way you'd expect anyway. They're not sitting there being secretive or mysterious about it. It's more like money just isn't their primary topic of conversation. When everyone else at the table is complaining about prices or bragging about a purchase or debating who got the better deal, they're kind of just there. Present, but not participating, like someone who already finished that level of the game. And here's the thing. Loud money talk is almost always a sign of financial anxiety. People who feel secure don't need to perform security. It's the ones who are still fighting for it, still trying to convince themselves and everyone else, who can't stop bringing it up. The second sign. They're almost weirdly unbothered by small expenses, not reckless, not careless, just calm. They don't split hairs over a $5 difference. They don't make a scene about a wrong charge on a bill. Not because they're throwing money around, but because their relationship with small amounts of money has fundamentally changed. When you have real financial cushion, the small stuff loses its grip on you. The stress response just doesn't fire the same way. Watch for that calmness. It's easy to miss because it looks like nothing, but it's actually something. Third sign, they ask surprisingly good questions. This one takes people off guard. You'd expect wealthy people to have all the answers, and some do, but a lot of them, the quietly wealthy ones especially, are relentlessly curious. They ask about your business. They ask how something works. They ask follow-up questions when most people would have already moved on. That's not accidental. People who build and keep wealth tend to be genuinely interested in how systems work, how people work, how money moves through things. They never really turn that off. Fourth, they're not impressed by titles. This is subtle, but it's real. When someone walks into a room with a fancy job title or drops the name of a prestigious company, most people shift slightly. Posture changes. Tone changes. A quiet deference kicks in. The secretly wealthy person usually doesn't move. Not dismissive, not rude, just unmoved. Because they've been around enough to know that a title is just a title. They've met too many broke executives and too many wealthy people with no title at all to still be performing that particular social ritual. Fifth sign, their home doesn't match your expectations. You find out where they live and it's fine, normal, maybe even underwhelming. Not a dump, just not what you'd picture for someone with serious money. And this trips people up because we've been conditioned to think that wealth upgrades your living situation first. But a lot of quietly wealthy people made a decision at some point, consciously or not, to stop letting their home be a financial statement. They live comfortably, but they don't live loudly. And that gap between what they could afford and what they chose to spend, that gap is actually a big part of why they have what they have. Sixth, they have unusual clarity about what they actually want. Most people, if you ask them what they want their life to look like in 10 years, give you a vague aspirational blur. Big house, nice car, travel more, freedom. It's all feeling, no structure. The quietly wealthy tend to be surprisingly specific. Not in a robotic way, but in a way that tells you they've thought about it. Like they've actually sat with the question and worked something out. That clarity isn't accidental. It's usually the thing that got them there. Because you can't build towards something you haven't actually defined. Seventh sign, they're genuinely comfortable with silence, in conversation, in meetings, in negotiations. They don't rush to fill the quiet. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence. It feels like failure, like awkwardness, like something needs to be fixed. So they talk, they over-explain. They offer concessions nobody asked for. The quietly wealthy person just waits, calmly. And in almost every context, especially financial ones, the person who can sit with silence the longest usually wins. It sounds small, but it isn't. Eighth sign, they talk about time differently than everyone else. Not in a motivational poster kind of way. It's more subtle than that. They decline things without guilt. They protect their schedule in a way that feels almost unapologetic. And when they do commit to something, they're fully there. No half presence. No one foot out the door. Most people treat time like it's something that happens to them. The quietly wealthy tend to treat it like it's the actual asset, more carefully guarded than money, honestly. Because at some point they figured out, maybe the hard way, that money can come back. Time doesn't, and once you see someone operating from that understanding, you don't forget it. Ninth, they have at least one income stream nobody knows about. This one you won't observe directly, but you'll catch hints of it. They're never quite as dependent on any one job or client or outcome as you'd expect. Layoffs don't seem to rattle them the way they rattle everyone else. A bad month doesn't send them into a spiral. There's a steadiness there that doesn't fully make sense on paper, until you realize there's probably a paper somewhere that explains it. A rental, a portfolio, a small business quietly running in the background. Something. Financial stability that looks effortless almost never is. It was built, quietly, over time, usually while everyone else was focused on spending what they earned instead of building what they owned. 10th sign. They don't try to convince you of anything financially. This is a big one. The people who are loudest about their investments, their strategies, their wins, are often the ones who need the validation most. They need you to believe it because somewhere in them, they're still not sure they believe it themselves. The quietly wealthy? They're not recruiting you. They don't need you to agree. They don't bring it up unless you ask. And even then, they're careful. Not secretive exactly, just measured. Like someone who learned a long time ago that talking about money too openly either makes people uncomfortable or makes them want something from you. Either way, it's not worth it. 11th, there's surprisingly low drama. Think about the most financially stressed people you know. There's usually a kind of chaos that follows them, decisions made in panic, reactions that are too big for the situation, a general sense of everything being urgent, everything being a crisis. Money stress does that to people. It narrows the mind, makes every small problem feel existential. The quietly wealthy tend to operate in a different register entirely. Problems are just problems. Things go wrong and they deal with it. Not because their life is perfect, but because financial security changes your nervous system over time. It literally changes how you respond to difficulty. The threat response gets quieter, and that quietness, it shows. 12th sign, they invest in things that don't show. Books, courses, coaches, therapy sometimes, legal advice before they need it, accountants who actually know what they're doing. None of this is visible. None of it photographs well, but it compounds in ways that the flashy purchases never do. Every quietly wealthy person I've ever observed has this pattern, spending serious money on invisible things, knowledge, systems, protection, relationships that take years to matter. While everyone around them is optimizing for appearance, they're optimizing for infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't trend, but it lasts. And the 13th sign, this is the one that tends to land hardest when people really sit with it. They're at peace with being underestimated, not performing humility, not pretending. Actually genuinely fine with you not knowing, fine with being misjudged, fine with someone assuming they're just a regular person living a regular life. Because here's what that comfort with invisibility actually means. It means their identity is no longer built on your perception of them. They don't need the room to know. They stop needing that somewhere along the way. And that freedom, that might actually be the truest sign of all. Because chasing status is expensive. In money, yes, but more than that. In energy, in time, in the slow erosion of knowing what you actually want versus what you've been convinced to want. The quietly wealthy opted out of that chase, not loudly, not as a statement. They just stopped and kept building while everyone else was looking the other way. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. Every single one of those signs is a behavior, not an income level. Not a net worth number, not something you're born with or handed. Every one of them is a choice that got repeated until it became a default, until it became just how they move through the world. And that matters, because it means the gap between where most people are and where the quietly wealthy operate. It's not primarily a money gap, it's a mindset gap, a behavioral gap, built over years of small, invisible decisions that nobody clapped for, nobody posted about, nobody noticed at all. That's the part that quietly gets me every time I think about it. We live in a world that rewards performance, that applauds the visible, that mistakes noise for substance and appearance for reality. And most people, genuinely good, genuinely hardworking people, get caught in that current without even realizing it. They spend years optimizing for the wrong signals, building the wrong things, measuring themselves against the wrong benchmarks. And the quietly wealthy person just keeps going, unbothered, under the radar, compounding in silence. There's something almost lonely about that path, honestly, because you don't get the validation along the way. You don't get the likes or the reactions or the approving looks. You just get the result, eventually, quietly, in a way that most people around you will probably underestimate even when they see it. But here's what I've noticed about the people who actually walk that path. They don't seem to mind the loneliness of it. Because at some point the internal compass got strong enough that the external noise just stopped mattering as much. And once that shift happens, really happens, not just as a concept you agree with, but as something you actually feel, everything changes. How you spend, how you save, what you chase, what you let go of. Most people will hear everything in this video and still miss it, not because they're not intelligent, but because the pull of the performance is strong, because the algorithm rewards flash, because the culture makes invisible wealth feel like failure and visible debt feel like success. And that current is hard to swim against when you're in it every single day. But a few people watching this will understand exactly what to do next. Not tomorrow, not after some big dramatic shift, just quietly, starting with one behavior, then another, until the pattern is theirs, until the default changes, until they become the person in the room that nobody's reading correctly. And they'll be fine with that. If something in this landed for you, if one of those signs made you pause or made you think about someone you know or made you think about yourself in a way you weren't quite expecting, that's worth paying attention to. That reaction is information. There's a lot more of this kind of thinking on this channel. Not hype, not shortcuts. Just the real patterns behind how money actually works and how people actually behave around it. If that's the kind of content you want more of, you know what to do, and I'll see you in the next one.